Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Hello, my name is Sameksha. I'm one of the master's students in Regional Planning Now department, and I'm really thrilled to facilitate this conversation where we're amazing panelists. We're here for an hour, and I'm going to try to make sure it's a very productive hour, so I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to start with a quick introduction from each of our panelists. They're going to be talking about their career trajectories and particularly their planning backgrounds.
Okay, you said I had 5 minutes, so. Hi, I'm Brestrup. I'm the planning director for the town of Amherst. I've been working in the planning department for about 20 years, and I was appointed planning director in 2016. I received a master's degree from UMass in landscape architecture in 1980, so that was a long time ago. And I went to work for a local survey and engineering firm over in Northampton. They had a landscape architecture department, and I worked there for about 3 years. And I learned a lot about grading and drainage and utilities underground, and it was very educational, I would say. A lot of our work was related to designing public parks because there was a lot of federal money at that time to design and renovate parks. And some of the work was on subdivisions and industrial parks. And my next job was in Belmont, Massachusetts, where I worked for a landscape architecture firm. And we did a lot of institutional work, like for universities and colleges, and we also worked on office parks and research parks. And at that time, there were big, high-tech firms building enormous buildings all around Boston, so I worked on some of those. I had a nickname at that place. They called me Miss Flesh and Gush because I knew all about all the things that happened down below the ground. So I don't know if that's something to be proud of or not. The work that I did in those two firms was really useful for the work that I do now because I learned a lot of the nitty-gritties about construction, about how things are designed and how they're built. And the one thing I remember from there is that there were hardly any women. There weren't women in the field, there weren't women on the construction sites. I would go to a job site and I'd be the only woman there. All the construction workers were men, all the people who were like engineers and architects were men. When we decided to adopt 2 children, we moved back out to Western Mass, and I taught construction at the Conway School, and I also helped to teach design here at UMass. And eventually, Liz Thompson, who's another graduate of UMass, and I started a small landscape firm. And we did some public work and residential design. And I liked the public work much better than the residential design, I must say, because I felt like you were serving a larger number of people, doing good for more people than just, somebody's backyard. Problems with the national economy caused me to look for a more stable position. So I looked around and I found the job with the town of Amherst. And I've been there ever since. I got hired as a land use planner in the planning department, and I worked with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I knew that I could do the work. I liked writing, I knew all about reading plans, and I knew about construction, and I thought, well, this is something that I can do. So I love I love working in municipal government. It's fun. It doesn't seem like it would be from the outside, but it's really fun. You really serve the community and help the people that live here. It's what makes planning exciting. You get to have a positive impact on people's lives. And my office works on park design, design standards for streetscapes and private work, zoning bylaws. We just had a set of new flood maps approved, FEMA maps, and we had to work on that. We worked on that for about 10 years, but we finally got them approved. We work on zoning, which again doesn't sound very exciting, but it really has a huge impact on what happens in a community. And we do a lot of work to help residents to understand what's going on around them, whether it's changes in regulations or new buildings that are going up. Sometimes they just have concerns because they don't understand what's going on. We also prepare a lot of grant applications, so we've been successful in getting grants to do big infrastructure projects as well as smaller projects like parks and playgrounds, which is really fun to work on. And so I would say my current job is very interesting. It's very varied. It makes it exciting to come to work every day. It's tiring and it's overwhelming at times. and working with the public can be quite challenging, as you probably know. But I feel really lucky to be doing what I'm doing. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Allen. I am a real estate project manager at Valley Community Development in Northampton. I'm an affordable housing developer. That is primarily what we build. My career started when I graduated here in 2004 with a dual degree, so I have a landscape architecture and regional planning degree. My first job coming out of grad school was working for the Regional Planning Agency, so it was a really good training ground for me to learn everything about municipal government without actually being in the government. So I was a circuit rider, and I spent a lot of my time working for the small communities, populations under 1,000 people, which the politics is unbelievable in these small towns, and learning town meeting protocol and just how to get stuff done from that local political side. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about different zoning techniques and planning techniques, and was able to grow as a professional in that job, and I was there for about 8 years. Then I took a position as the city planner in East Hampton, and then I really had to sink or swim in terms of knowing how to navigate through the politics of a community, how to get things done, how to mediate, how to be the one that sort of brings people together over controversial issues. I learned a tremendous amount about permitting. I learned a tremendous amount of construction techniques and civil engineering and that sort of thing. But when I was there, I sort of realized that the thing that I loved the most was the actual construction infrastructure projects that we were working on. So at the time, we were building the boardwalk that's around Nashwanik Pond. That was kind of a big game changer for downtown. We also were working on a Mills project where we were developing huge parking infrastructure, underground electrical, enhancing a bike path, which had major implications for the economic development for 5 mill owners, and really was another game changer for that section of the neighborhood. So I loved being at the construction table. I loved negotiating change orders. I loved going head to head with the contractors and hashing things out. And I realized that I really kind of wanted to be more on the real estate side. So there was an opportunity that came up that was for a consulting firm in Amherst, and it was for an affordable housing consultant. So it was a career switch for me. I didn't know anything about financing for housing. I didn't understand real estate financing. I didn't realize how complicated affordable housing development was. And so that was really a challenge and fascinating to me to kind of learn this whole new industry that I knew nothing about. Spent several years doing that. COVID hit, I freaked out, and I went and jumped and worked for a civil engineering firm for about a year. Realized it was a bad mistake and it wasn't where I was supposed to be, but in that moment realized, okay, what can I gain out of this? And this developer in particular was kind of one of those dirty developers and was, you know, the most controversial, like big shoving things down the throats of communities. And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be an affordable housing developer, this is where I'm gonna learn my chops on how to be in a very contentious public hearing and hold my professional face and just like sail through it. So that's the skill that I really, I think, gained in that 1 year working for a civil firm. And now I'm working at Valley. So now I'm scoping out sites, I'm sketching out my own designs, we're thinking big picture, how does this fit into the community, understanding the community plans, trying to respond to those community plans. So what I like about working for the CDC is it's planning, but it's the real estate side, and it really has a huge community focus. So I don't feel like I've lost that side of my planning job. I feel like I've just enhanced it in sort of a different way. So that's my journey.
Thank you.
Your turn.
Thank you. So my name is Erin Howard. I'm currently the planning director for the city of Hartford. I graduated from UMass in 2009 as a regional planning degree, focused on economic development. 2009 was a tough year. When I left UMass, I could only get an internship because it was really hard in the planning field at that time. I was working from my hometown and doing grant writing, working on brownfield development, that sort of thing for that first year. Because it was such a bad year, I went ahead and got my real estate license during that year because I needed structure. And so from then, I've actually held my real estate license for the past 15 years or so, or 10 years, in residential development. Don't do it very often. As you learn, there's a lot going on in my life. But from there, I got a job working for Mylona McBroom, a civil engineering firm, and I was in the private sector working for billable hours. I got to work on some really cool projects. But I learned, too, very quickly in the first 2 years there that I just loved being in municipal government, and I loved being part of projects from start to finish. Private sector is great, but you work on components of a project. You don't necessarily work on the entire thing. So I left there. I went to work as an assistant planner in the town of Windsor for 1 year. As I said, I was a focus on economic development. I got highly involved in the state of Connecticut with the CCAPA organization. And some colleagues said, hey, Erin, they need an economic development director in the city of Torrington. We think you'd be great. So I was like 28, and I left, and I became an economic development director for the city of Torrington for 5 years. My heart and passion 100% is in economic development. I think it's just a specialized component or focus of planning at the end of the day. To be really good at economic development and real estate development, you need to understand planning and kind of all the facets that go along from start to finish in development, and really helping folks through that process, whether it's the planning, the design, the construction, the actual development side of it. I love negotiating. I love being at the table. I negotiate tax fixing agreements. I negotiate development deals, that sort of thing. I left Torrington and went to the city of Hartford, and for the past 5 years, I was the economic development director. I came in 2019, and like everyone else, all of a sudden COVID hit, and we had to change our approach on everything that we were doing. It turned into business protection, trying to keep businesses open and alive. And so for the first couple of years in Hartford, I spent a lot of time working on small business. I'm not sure if you guys heard about the HeartLift program. It was a nationally recognized ARPA program through the city of Hartford, where we did activating vacant spaces, and we partnered with vacant spaces and property owners and came for a one-for-one match to support and activate those vacant spaces in our downtown. The city of Hartford is primarily a business community, so it's busy during the week, corporate, and then it's kind of dead in the weekend, or dead on the weekends. So during all of this, we were pushing residential development, and so we got really lucky through ARPA or through COVID, I would say, because we were starting to build residential development. So as everybody was stalling, development across the country was thriving, and we have like 97, 98% occupancy rates right now in the city of Hartford because of that. Building for our generation and younger, I am a millennial, top part of it, but building spaces where in our generation and younger, it's all about places. It's not just about jobs, it's about quality of life. And I think COVID opened that door for a lot of folks, especially in the development world, to realize that you have choices on where you want to live and where you want to work, and you can do it remotely. And so creating cool places is what helps drive your economy. And so for the last few years, that's what we've been focused on with our ARPA plan and that sort of thing. For me, we had transition this past year. I worked under Mayor Luke Bronin, who decided not to rerun, and we have a new mayor that came on board, and that mayor has made some decisions to go in different directions. So in the interim, and for the past year, I was in the acting position as the planning director for the city of Hartford. Right now, I am the planning director for the city of Hartford, but I am in transition, so I'm trying to figure out what my next step is. I'll say for planning, City of Hartford is one of the few cities that actually adopted a full form-based code for zoning. If I was staying, we'd be working on amending that. Form-based code is wonderful for new construction, not exactly perfect for an aging historic community. In the zoning world, we basically created 80% of our city became legally non-conforming. And in the state of Connecticut, non-conforming laws got a lot stricter. And so it's made it really hard to support growth in the city. So we're in the process of I wouldn't say overhauling, because I do think there's some benefits to form-based code, but we're in the process of updating the regulations to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I would say I'm a great example of there's so many different directions you can go in the planning field, and you can just continue to grow. And I'm in a great spot right now in my career. I'm still pretty young, so I have options. I can either go nonprofit, I can go stay in government, or I can go private sector. And so those are the options that are before me today.
Thank you. I think it really is a testament, all your experiences on the different directions planning degree can take you, and that's really good to hear. I'm also realizing we probably need one session each with each of you rather than a panel to like really discuss experiences, but this is a panel that's called Women in Planning, and it's Women History Month. Tomorrow's International Women's Day. So I'm going to start with a question about how being a woman has shaped your experiences, what challenges you've faced in these leadership positions you're in. Yeah. And how you've overcome them and navigated through them too.
So I probably had it the hardest because I started off really early. I was going into my field shortly after the women's movement really got a grip, and so there weren't very many women in landscape architecture, engineering, or any of the fields that I was working in. So I did have landscape architecture colleagues, women in my office, but as I said, when I went out to job sites, I was the only woman. So that was challenging, but it also was something that I just got used to, and after a while, it didn't bother me anymore. And I just felt like I've got to do the best job I can to prove to myself and everybody else that I can do this work. And so, it probably made me work harder than some other people. It made me spend longer hours in the office and just to prove myself, but I think in the end I did prove myself, so I felt pretty good about, the different types of work that I did. And I would just advise younger women coming into planning and landscape architecture, just have confidence and be proud of yourself and work hard. Yeah.
So I think the real estate world is very male-dominated, and the construction world is very male-dominated. So I've been asked more than once if I brought my pink construction hat to a job meeting. And then I just asked them if they brought theirs. So, you just have to have a bit of a sense of humor, I think, is part of it. You have to learn to stand tall. And I think the thing that I've learned is not to be afraid to ask questions, especially when it comes to like construction and building technology. That is not what my expertise is. We have that in our office for sure. There are people who actually have graduated from the building technologies department here and have that expertise and bring it to the office, but it is not my strong suit. So if I am the only representative from the organization at the table at a construction meeting, just not being afraid to just say, hey, I don't know what that term is, or hey, I don't understand what that means, or can you just explain and take 2 minutes to just explain how that fits into this piece and how that all fits together. Generally, people are perfectly happy and are willing to explain. When I was working in city government and was working on infrastructure projects and really didn't understand anything about construction, my comment was always, well, I have to be able to answer to the mayor when she asks the question, what is this? Or I need to be able to answer to our funders why this is a problem. So I need you to explain this to me because I need to be able to explain it clearly to somebody else who's higher up than me. So I think just asking questions and not being afraid to ask questions when you're at the table, and just, again, being confident in yourself and your capabilities and know that you're there for a reason.
So economic development's definitely still a man's world as well, especially the more money at the table, the more, stereotypical white male is what you deal with. I have learned that in that role, as a woman, I have been pegged very many different names. If I'm excited and energetic and passionate, I'm emotional. And if I'm like really good at my job and I'm holding people accountable, I'm too tough and I'm really hard. I've learned, I have a really great mentor who at the Capital Region Development Authority, who said to me, as long as you stay true to yourself and as long as you continue to have your self-integrity and you stay consistent, you will prevail. And you'll always have people coming at you who are going to want their own thing, and they're going to use those excuses every time you're trying to do something. But if you just stay true to yourself, your actions and who you are will prevail, and you will do well. And so, yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to prove myself, but I don't do that in a way of trying to, spend time trying to prove myself. I just do the work. and the work speaks for itself. And the more work you do and the more dedication you are to your work, people will start to realize that at the end of the day, you're the person they call. And, you know, I'm in a really tough position right now, and that's actually coming to light for me. It's, you know, I'm in a transitional period, and everyone's calling me now, and it's saying, hey, you're the one with the institutional knowledge. You're the one who understands how these deals work. You know, it will pay off, and I just think it is tough. I think we do have to work harder in this environment, but like I said, as long as you stay true to who you are, and you have to also enjoy what you do, but if you love that and you're doing that, I think you'll be okay.
I just wanted to say something about, I think what Erin said about integrity and honesty. That's really important. Like in the town of Amherst, there is a lot of public interest in what goes on at the town level, and there's been a lot of suspicion about what happens in town hall over the years. And you know, I've tried to bring honesty and integrity and transparency to the job, and I think it's really paid off, because when I say things now, people believe me, and that's really important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think as an aspiring planner, I will say, I mean, despite all the challenges, wherever you are, it is inspiring. I think the visibility aspect of it, seeing women in leadership positions, does something for the younger generation coming up to this position. So it's great that you're here and that you're doing the work you do. To take it to a more personal level, I was wondering what inspires you to do the work you do, and what trends looking forward excite you in your work, changes, trends. Yeah.
Well, what excites me is what I said already, which is helping the community to be better, helping people to understand what's going on around them, because I think people get very threatened by change, and when I can explain something to them and make it less of a fearful type of thing, that's really helpful. You know, when new projects come along, they worry about, well, who's going to live there, and what's it going to look like, and is there going to be a place for me to go and sit under a tree or whatever. And you know, you can explain things to people in a way that makes them feel better about things and makes them more accepting. So that's something that I think is really good. In terms of what the trends that I see coming along, one of the things that I think is really exciting is money that's being poured into building housing, and housing of all types. And we're seeing that in Amherst. And of course, we have a great need for housing because of the university and the pressures that get put on our housing stock. And people are really, the state and federal government are really coming up with money to build housing, and developers are, you know, flocking to Amherst and building things, and it's really exciting. And some of the projects are going to be beautiful, and we're going to be very proud of them. But I think that's one of the most exciting trends that I've seen, that people are finally recognizing that they need to put money into more housing stock.
Well, obviously, housing is my passion. That's what inspires me to do the work. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a housing crisis. Have you heard about that? Yeah, I think just when I walk through Northampton, going to get lunch or coffee, whatever, and seeing people on the street, I mean, that's often who we're housing. A lot of Valley's tenant population are really low income individuals that are formerly homeless. So to me, getting people out of shelter, getting people off the street, that is something we talk about at staff meetings all the time, and it isn't a passion for most people, or I would say most of anybody at Valley. There's only 9 of us, so that is what keeps me doing this day to day. I think part of it too is the controversy around affordable housing. I say this today after Monday, where I had a brutal 3.5-hour meeting in East Hampton about a proposed project where there were so many racist comments and so many inappropriate, awful things that were said. I was ready to quit my job. But somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to battle it. Somebody's got to challenge it. And if it's not affordable housing developers and planners who are on the ground doing the work, I don't know who is, because there's a lot of awful things that are being said about people who are poor, and it's really unfortunate. So that is what makes me come to work every day. In terms of trends in planning, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is the recognition of the planning community that our zoning has really enforced white supremacy, that we have developed zoning that benefits a very certain population in this country. and that the communities that are pushing back against multifamily housing and what that means and sort of the underground current of the dialogue of that. I don't know if you've been following what's been happening in the eastern part of the state with the MBTA communities in the town of Milton, who just refused to adopt the zoning that was requiring multifamily housing for those communities that have public transit. It's like, what is going on, people? Really, like, you need to take a deep look at yourself and see how your zoning has actually impacted the socioeconomics of your community and of populations that are trying to live in your community. So to me, that's kind of an exciting thing that I think we're finally recognizing, and I'm hoping more communities are going to start tackling. As Christine knows, because I've been in front of the ZBA in Amherst for 7 months on a project that is an affordable homeownership project with the intent of increasing BIPOC homeownership and trying to address the racial wealth gap, and understanding that our assets in our households are tied to our homes, that the majority of Americans, they can retire because of their house, that they can sell their house and they can take that money and retire. And that, you know, for a lot of Black Americans, they don't have that because of the zoning that has been in place, because of financial redlining, inability to get loans, credit issues, like the whole gamut. So like, it's time for us to sort of dig in and recognize and figure out there's multiple different ways we need to address this issue, but everybody should be able to have the asset of a house so that they can retire comfortably and pass that money on to the generation behind them. So to me, that's something that I'm very passionate about, and we, again, talk about a lot at work, so.
So I think I've learned from day one that if you're in public sector, you really have to love what you do, and you know that everything you do, every move you make, you're improving someone's life. And there's a reality behind that in the public sector. I mean, at the end of the day, you serve you're serving the public, the constituents, the residents that live there, and the stakeholders. And so my drive is being able to see that improvement. And so a great example I can share with you is this morning, I just went to a press conference in downtown Hartford. We had a hotel that was the only unionized hotel, and it served 139 local residents, and it's the Hilton, and it was really having a hard time maintaining itself as a hotel for many, many, many years. They got involved with a Section 108 loan, and they needed to basically get more funding. And so just before COVID, we worked with them to try to save jobs, save the union, and then we got them the money. We were ready to underwrite, we were ready to sign off on everything, and then COVID hit. And our world changed, and it turned into trying to protect those jobs, keep the hotel open, figuring out how to save a major downtown asset. Today, I got to stand at a ribbon cutting because we were able to save the hotel partially. They dropped it down to a DoubleTree. It's still under the Hilton brand. We were able to save at least 40 jobs in downtown Hartford and created over 100 units of housing. 20% of that would be affordable housing in downtown Hartford. So for me, that's what gets me excited, is being able to do the projects to help those things happen, and working with residents and folks to make sure that we can create wealth and opportunity. To build on the trend that you guys were talking about, I think folks don't realize that housing is so important because it's also an opportunity for wealth and growth. And when you work in a big city, a distressed municipality, we talk housing all the time, but it's not just about affordable housing, it's about housing options and housing choice. And there's different levels of housing, whether it's for really deeply subsidized housing from 30 to 60 AMIs to going to 80 to 120. And the challenge that you have in Connecticut is and I think you guys learned this throughout your school, is that every municipality in every state has a very different way in which government works and operates. And in Connecticut, we're 169 municipalities that have their own basic rule within each of those municipalities. And the cities are up against the small towns, and the small towns in Connecticut we don't want affordable housing, we don't want low-income housing, we don't want that. Funding is tied to all of that and is driven into the cities, but what does that do in the cities? It actually makes it so it's really hard for your general population for growth. Like, it's hard to help them step up and get them opportunities and move them into a higher class. And so you keep centralizing the low income disparities, and then you have the wealth around you, and it's just not working. And so we spend a lot of time, yes, in Hartford, yes, we support affordable housing, but it's not just 30% housing, and our developers come to us and say, we can do LIHTC deals, we can do all of this, and at the end, the community's screaming and saying, no, 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 no more low-income housing. We want 80 to 120. It's still workforce housing because it creates opportunities. And so that's what I see happening right now, and a lot of our development deals that we've been doing was doing that, coming up with really cool, creative development projects where you have different levels of income for housing, and I've seen it work, and it's working across the country. It's working in Connecticut. And so it's trying to encourage folks to do that, but there's such a stigma behind affordable housing. And I think there's just so much more education that has to go into it for folks to realize that affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean Section 8. And affordable housing in a lot of places in Connecticut means you don't want your teacher living next door to you. And that's a reality, and that's something that we have to do better as a community to figure out how do we create opportunities for all.
Can I just add one thing? So another thing that I'd love to see people do is challenge the term community character in their zoning. Character for who? Whose character? Whose eyes is that through? So I would encourage students, as you're moving out into your field and you're, redoing your zoning, challenge the term community character, because what is that? Whose eyes is that through? And should we be thinking about other eyes that we should be looking through for that character?
I just wanted to add that I'm proud to say that Amherst is, generally speaking, welcoming to affordable housing, and I think that they've been doing it for a long time, and they have a way of doing it, I should say we have a way of doing it, that keeps it from being really onerous. If you fall below 10% affordable housing, then you're subject to unfriendly action by developers to come in and build affordable housing. But Amherst has gotten to the point where we can reach out to developers and work with developers, and we were really lucky to be able to work with Valley CDC on this project for homeownership. And I think it's been a positive experience. Of course, Jessica has worked really hard to get everybody in the community involved and knowledgeable about the project. So I think that probably fended off some of the opposition. But in general, Amherst is welcoming of affordable housing. So I'm proud of that.
Thank you. I'm glad you touched on very important, and the character development piece just brought back memories from judicial planning law class, where we were really questioning Hadley's community character question. But anyway, after this, I have one more question. After that, we'll be opening the floor for questions from the audience. So just a heads up, so you get mentally prepared if you have any questions. Steering the conversation to a different direction for the last question. You've kind of already touched on this here and there, but is there any advice particularly you would give to an aspiring planner today, particularly for women or any other underrepresented groups kind of navigating this field as planners?
Well, I guess one of the things that I experienced was I wasn't too picky about jobs that I took in the beginning of my career. I wasn't looking for the perfect job. I took jobs that would allow me to learn things, and I think that's really good advice. Don't turn your nose up at something if it doesn't seem glamorous or like the thing that you dreamed of always doing. Take the job, learn from it, move on. And so, that really helped me to build my experience, build my knowledge base, and then the next job I went to, I knew more, and it just got better from there. And in terms of, unfortunately, I think women do need to work harder, and that's still true in order to prove yourself. But one of the interesting things I've experienced, and I was just thinking about this today, is that the men who were above me in various jobs that I've worked in were very accepting of me. They saw that I was a hard worker, and they said, oh, she can do that, and she can do that, and she can do that. And sometimes it gets overwhelming because they say, oh, she can get the job done, so I'm going to give her more work to do. It was the young men who were rising up who somehow felt threatened by me. And so that was like a shock to me. It was like, what do you mean? They're, they're learning too. So, it's all different levels. You do get this feeling that women are somehow different or somehow, not supposed to be doing what we're doing. But I was really lucky to have supervisors who were very supportive of me, so that was good.
This is going to sound goofy, but women, please work on your handshake. No fish, no floppy fish. Really, like it really sets kind of that first impression of your confidence level. I've had women interns that I've actually, the first thing that we do when they come to actually work is we work on their handshake. For like 5 minutes, web to web, web to web. So it's a goofy bit of advice, but really I find that women tend to have a very sort of floppy fish handshake, and it just doesn't set a good precedent when you're moving forward in a business meeting. You know, show your confidence right off the bat. The other thing is, you know, this is a term that I've learned while practicing karate. I'm a karate practitioner, so learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, which I think is a really hard thing, and it's taken me a long time to get there. But if you can learn to be comfortable with an uncomfortable situation, being an underrepresented person in the room, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of embarrassing yourself, like, it's okay. We all make mistakes, and that's how we learn. We either succeed or we learn. There's no failure. So really just learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, I would say, is a bit of advice that I would pass on to anybody.
So I probably build on both of what you've both said so far. I think you make a really great point. You don't want to necessarily be too picky, and I think part of the thing I've seen even in the workplace now is the younger generation wants to get all the way to the end before they start. And I think you have to still build your roots, and you still have to build your skill sets. And so the advice I was given when I was younger was always take a job, but always get something out of that job and learn something from that job for a skill set. So I've gone from interning to doing town planning to then working. I was in a small town, I went to a big town, then I went to a city, I did the private sector, and every time I went into a different place, I learned something new. And it really hasn't been that long. It's only been 15 years, wow, since I graduated here, and I've learned so much. And what it also does for you is when you're looking at that about building your own career, it opens up opportunities for you. And so every place that you go, you're going to meet new people, and you're going to create new opportunities for yourself. I would say hold on to those relationships too. I have relationships from when I was an intern in Middletown to relationships now, and all of those mentors that I've had in my life have really helped me be who I am and continue to grow. I'd also say, even though you don't want to be picky, who you work for matters. When you have someone above you that has faith in you and gives you the space, I say, to fly and to learn and to grow and to make mistakes, it's a really great environment to be in. So when you have that, hold on to that, and hold on to it as long as you can, and then take from that lesson and learn and grow. I really truly believe that that's what's helped me. And yeah, you may have a job you don't like, and yeah, that can happen, and toxic work environments can happen, but learning how to work through that and finding your space is really critical and key. So,
Great points.
Thank you. Let's all thank our speakers for the time they've given us. We're opening to questions from the floor. You can just raise your hand if you have one, and I can come to you. There we go. We are recording, so I'm going to give you the mic.
Hi. Thank you for that. It was really good, and I appreciate it a lot. The phrase community, what was it? Community character was something I've never heard of, and maybe that's because I'm a freshman. But could you touch up on that, please?
My squeaky shoes and me.
You'll see, if you start reading zoning bylaws, you'll see that term is often used as an element that a community will grant a permit based on. It's like one of the things that you have to hit in order to be granted the permit. So you're not impacting the environment, you're not hurting wetlands, you're doing stormwater. your project fits into the community character. And so, I think it's challenging from the planning side, because when you're writing a decision, how do you make that fit? And then two, I think we just need to challenge what that means. And a lot of times it's actually particularly tied to affordable housing or permitting for affordable housing. So I think the underlying is a multifamily in a single family neighborhood. It doesn't fit into the community character. So the question is it time for the character to change? Do we want to be stagnant? Do we want to evolve? Do we want to move with the times? Do we need to think about, we have a housing crisis and limited land? We need to think about design differently. What does that mean? So that's what I'm getting at when it comes to community characters. It's very much tied to permit decisions and how a project is allowed in a community. And so as you head out into the world and you're working on zoning and you're working in a municipality, just something to think about and to potentially challenge, and think about how that impacts growth in your community.
And I could add to that, we have a lot of new buildings in Amherst, and there's a lot of complaining about the new multi-story buildings that are built in the north end of downtown. I think they're great. I think that they're, enlivening that end of downtown. They're bringing more people to live downtown. They're housing, a lot of people who live there are students, but some of them aren't, and I think it's a really great thing. But many people in town complain about them because they're not, within the community character. They don't look like the little cottages on Cottage Street, or they don't look like the little houses that are across from Kendrick Park. And I think it's really unfortunate, because we need housing. We need all different kinds of housing. And those buildings are housing, hundreds of people. And I think that's a really good thing. So we have to, get away from thinking that we have to rebuild all of the things that were built in the 19th century. We don't have to do that. We can build new things, and they're going to be good too.
Thank you. Peter. My shoes.
Hi, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate your comments. I wanted to start by observing that there's a connection between some of what I've heard today. So the conversation about community character and like who belongs in the community, I think has a lot in common with the conversation about who belongs in the profession and women entering the profession and kind of incumbents wanting to protect the character, the masculine character, and who are you coming in here and doing something different. So my question building on that is, each of you talked about entering a man's world of planning or of development or real estate, but I wonder if you've also experienced what it might be like for that to be a woman's world. So like instead of you entering someone else's world, what would it mean to change that environment so that it's less of a masculine world? Either if you've experienced that or what might you hope that would look like?
That's a great question.
Sort of take it. Great benefits and a flexible work schedule. Seriously. I worked for a civil engineering firm that was a male-dominated firm. There was no flexibility in work. People were calling each other in the middle of the night. There was no respect and no boundaries for family time. I work for a small nonprofit. We have awesome benefits. I make literally more money in my paycheck because the benefits are so much better than the male civil engineering firm who refused to put money into his benefits package because he'd rather buy 3 houses with cash. So, to me, that is a woman's run world would have a flexible schedule and awesome benefits, and recognizing that there's a live-work balance, and it's not all about grinding out work every day. That's my 2 cents. Do you have anything to add?
I would say I would be scared if it was an all-woman's world, because for the same reason it's scary if it's an all-man's world. I think at the end of the day, men and women do bring a lot to the table, but I think there needs to be equality and equity across that. And I think figuring out ways to bring that, and to your point, like creating environments that are open to that. Back in the day, even unfortunately still now, the idea is the woman has the children and she's the one who stays at home and takes care of the kids, and the expectation is she does that and she works. And so trying to change that up a little bit, trying to create those work environments. and to encourage people or more women into the field, just keep talking about it. Keep encouraging them that it doesn't, you have an opportunity. You can be at the table. You are valued. You are strong enough. You can do these things. And getting away from, I think educationally we used to teach that too, right? I know there's STEM classes now and things of that nature to get women into engineering and that sort of thing. I think it's the same thing with our younger kids, really educating them that anything is possible. And for me, that's what it was for me. I was just lucky enough to have a family that just based with 2 older brothers, and from my previous professors, they know this very true about me. I'm used to the fight. Like my brothers, I have older brothers, so I'm always trying to keep up with them, and I'm always trying, so encouraging women from day one that they can do anything and open their eyes to all of that, and creating a balance across all the industries, I think we actually will have a very successful environment across the board.
I think women can add to the atmosphere that makes it comfortable for everybody to work. And speaking about town government, all the different departments have a different character, if you don't mind me using that word again. But, it depends on who the supervisor is, who the department head is, as far as how much leeway people have to take time off for their families. And I tend to be very flexible. And what happens is I get a tremendous amount of work out of the people that work for me, because they work on the weekends. They work, during holidays. It's going to make me cry, but they really work hard, and they really appreciate having that flexibility to take off time for their sick child, or go to their child's play, or, just do things for their families that they couldn't do if they were in a very rigid environment. So it's up to us who are supervisors to allow those things to happen. And I wouldn't say it's easy in the town of Amherst, because, the higher-ups aren't necessarily supportive of that increasing, or the amount of flexibility that I allow people. But what I say is, in response, that look at how hard they work. Look at all they produce. Look at what they show up at night to meetings, and if they're taking time off in the morning to be home with a child, great, and it's a real seller. In fact, I've had people tell me, who work for me, I want to stay in this job even though I can make more money somewhere else, because I have that flexibility.
Thank you. Any one last two? CDN, then Elspeth.
First off, thank you to all you ladies up on the panel. I will be soon graduating. I'm one of those weird non-traditional peoples. But I do have a question. It's great to see female faces in the profession, but I'm going to ask, as female-born, gender non-conforming, what is the professional world looking for us, non-typical folk? Because you also mentioned not having biopic within the professional field as well. So what is it that local town and municipalities are specifically trying to do to create a more diverse voice that is brought to the table?
So Amherst has a DEI department. It's very small right now. It's only the director and somebody who works for her, but I think they work really hard to get a diverse group of people working for Amherst. And, recently we hired people in our CREST department, and we hired people across all, ethnicities, and I don't know about their sexual orientation or anything like that, but it just looks like a really diverse group to me. And I think that the DEI department and HR try really hard to be respectful of those diverse individuals who come in and seek jobs with us. And I think Amherst does a pretty good job of recruiting people. Whether they can keep them or not is another thing. I think, we do struggle to keep people who are from different communities, just because there aren't that many of them who work for the town right now. But there is a definite intention and effort to hire.
This year, Valley has, we're a host organization for a program out of OPCO, which is a community development corporation in Roxbury, and it's the Fellowship for Equitable housing development. And so they have eight participants in this cohort, and they're all women of color. And the whole point is to try to increase people of color within the affordable housing development, recognizing that many of the communities that we're housing are people of color, but it's built by white folks. And so it's like, how do we shift that dynamic? And so this fellow, she started in October. She'll be with us for 2 years. She has no experience in real estate. She has no experience in planning. She has an associate's degree in accounting. That's what she comes to me with. So we are starting from ground up in terms of real estate, affordable housing, community engagement, and it's a lot of work on both of our parts because I'm working with somebody who has absolutely no experience in planning and real estate. So we're really starting from ground up learning. Also challenging in just terms of technology, knowing how to use Outlook calendar, stuff like that. But I think we literally sit right next to one another. We share stories all day long, and I've learned a tremendous amount of her because she has lived experience as being homeless. So she brings to me her lived experience of having to work through social service agencies to get information, to get housing. She brings a different eye to the table. We're doing marketing for the project in Amherst, the Affordable Home Ownership Project. And as a woman of color, she knows where her community hangs out and gets information. And so she's developing the marketing plan to help us with that outreach to make sure that we are hitting the communities of color. So, so that's the leap that Valley is taking. And it's kind of a new process for us, but I think so far so good. I think on both of our parts, I think she's learned a lot in real estate, and I've learned a lot from her in terms of her lived experience as a person of color and somebody who has been unhoused.
So kind of to build upon that, I would say right now I'm lucky to be working in a city where I think the urban centers do it so much better. I think they are way more welcoming to diversity. And I don't want to make it sound naive, but it almost is like it's natural. Our hiring processes, our DEIs, we don't look at people for the color or anything like that. It's a very welcoming and community and the diversity, and we thrive on our diversity. And I think that's what makes the cities, exciting. I would also, on the same token, say I think our smaller towns could do better in a lot of ways, right? Our towns need to be more representative of the people that we represent, and we need to create and promote more diversity, not just in the cities. I think the cities are known for that, but I think our small towns could definitely do better. I know that in Hartford, we have a lot of great programs. We offer up to employees, we offer up within the neighborhoods, we offer it up across our stakeholders, but other towns don't do that. And so trying to, I encourage you as a young planner. I think planners also by nature, it's totally stereotypical, but it's true. Like we are a more welcoming industry and more of a diverse industry, frankly. But if you were to go into a community that isn't that, I would encourage you to help figure out ways to promote more diversity, because the more diversity you create, the more opportunities, the more welcoming I think your community can become. But it's not something that will happen overnight for sure, especially when you're dealing with small towns that have 2-acre lot zoning and they have all farms and things of that nature. But it's a tough question. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think that's what I would encourage you to do if you're in that situation or working in a smaller town. Try to promote diversity as best as you can.
I'll also note that I think CDCs are way more diverse across the state than planning departments. And I see a lot of planners of color. When I was on the state chapter for the APA and the planners of color that were part of that chapter, a lot of the conversations we had were with individuals that worked in the CDC world, because it's more in neighborhoods, boots on the ground, getting stuff done. And so that's what I've seen in my experience too a little bit.
Last question, Elizabeth, are you?
Thank you. I really appreciated CD's question, and this sort of builds on this. My experience is that in the work life, it's not that hard. Where I've always found, particularly when I was younger, found it, the being female trickier is in a male-dominated environment doing socializing. and that can be very challenging, trying to figure out how to be pleasant without being too pleasant. And I don't know. And I imagine for non-binary people, people with a different background, that's even more challenging. And I wonder if you have any like insights that you've gained about how to walk those lines or experiences you would be willing to share with us.
I think people naturally gravitate towards people who are like them. And so even I find myself talking more to the women in the office than I talk to the men. And I see the men talking to each other about what they did on the weekend and talking about, taking their kid to the baseball game or whatever. It's just sort of natural. But I think, we do have to try to make friendships with the other, And it is challenging, and sometimes you have to make it an intention. You have to go out of your way to make it happen. And so I guess that's the advice I would give people, to try to go out of their way to make people who are different from them feel, welcome. I try to go out of my way to make the men who work for me feel like I care about them and their lives, and, ask them about what they did on the weekend and those kinds of things. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I have that intention.
It's a good question. I think, kind of following up on that, it's easy to talk to people if you just let them talk about themselves. That honestly is my social trick. Like if I go to a cocktail party and I don't know anybody, just start asking questions and have somebody, so what do you do? And blah, blah, blah. People love to talk about themselves. So I find that can be a way to sort of break the ice a little bit and to at least start that conversation. I'm also a bit of a joker, so I have no problem like sticking it to somebody if they, make a funny comment, or, I use that side of my personality. And I also like sports. So if there's anything, I can always talk about the Bruins or the Patriots or the Red Sox. So that's, that's my go-to if I need to. But I would say, if you've got nothing, just ask somebody to talk about themselves, and you'll start a conversation pretty quickly. And I'm sure then you find some commonality. Then you find some back and forth and something to talk about. So.
I'm always trying to think of how to build upon the previous statements, because I agree with all that.
Probably start you.
I would say two things. So from a leadership standpoint, so I manage a bunch of people now, right? I did for a while. So I think your points are well made. I think you can't force relationships, but at least if you get to know the people that you're working with just a little bit, it goes a long way in relationship building, getting work done, that sort of thing. To answer directly, in my current, I'm not shy to tell you the things that happen. So I got our new mayor came in and brought in a very young man to replace me, and it's last few days, everybody's congregating in that room, laughing and joking and having a great time. And so I think you have to just, live with it, figure out how to manage it, but it still happens. I'm just being honest that it still happens in this world that we're in, and you just have to figure out a way to kind of rise above it. And that's where I tell myself the work still matters, and at the end of the day, you can talk and jive, and at the end, but your work is what's going to speak for itself, and you gain respect that way. So build relationships, stay true to the integrity, stay true to yourself, and the people that know, and they're going to surround you as much. And so that's the best advice I could give anybody. Just keep being who you are, and obviously don't break rules and things, but be who you are, do the right thing. In any situation, even in hard times, as long as you stay consistent, it's the best thing you could do for yourself, and you'll always prevail. Sometimes you may not realize it. I could have had this conversation with myself maybe